My brothers and my sisters, this is Reverend Dr. Tony Hart from Beulah Baptist Church in the Falls. Today I'll be speaking straight from the heart. Our God is great and greatly to be praised. Today I'd like to talk about why we should vote as Christians. I'm a proud African American minister of the gospel, and I have many conversations with fellow believers, people who embrace radical political viewpoints. And I have spoken with a number of people who said they didn't believe in voting, that their vote didn't count. And I say to them that if you don't vote, your vote won't count. Every vote counts. If I had to vote for dog catcher, I would vote. I'm sure you've heard that people say that politics is dirty, that Christians shouldn't be involved in that, Muslims shouldn't be involved in that, Jews, people shouldn't be involved in that, Hindus shouldn't, Buddhists, no one who's on a spiritual path should be involved in politics. I bear to differ, and here's the reason why. Politics is dirty. I'll say, yes, you're right. The political process is dirty, but we have the answer to make sure that we clean it up. Let that sink in. We have the answer and the responsibility, the moral imperative to clean up the body politic, not drain the swamp. That's a fascist term. We're not interested in draining the swamp. We're just making sure that we want better government. And as Christians, we should be engaged in conscientious, creative engagement, conscientious civic engagement. So here's the reason why I believe we should vote as disciples of Christ, born again believers and followers of Jesus. Number one, because we have the God-given and constitutional right to vote in these great United States. In the 1920s, white women were given the right to vote. African Americans were disenfranchised decade after decade, century after century. We were enslaved in this country from the 1660s all the way up to the 1860s. We were enslaved, and it was illegal for us to vote. It was illegal for us to read and write. It was illegal for us to own property, and it was legal for us to sit on a jury. It was illegal for us to own a weapon. And we had to work from sun up to sundown. Can't see in the morning, they can't see at night. White men who had property and then other whites were able to vote. African Americans didn't get the right to vote in the Deep South until the 1960s. We had this Reconstruction period from the 1860s to the 1880s. That was quasi-democracy, according to the Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. It was a step in the right direction. We had the right to vote, we enjoyed the fruit of our labor, and we had open access to public education. And we took to that like a duck to water. So I'm inspired by God to go and exercise my right to vote. And constitutionally in the United States, in the 21st century, as an American citizen, I have the right to vote. So I'm a unashamedly African American and unapologetically Christian. I vote, number two, to vindicate our ancestors. They were disenfranchised. I have the golden opportunity and the constitutional right to vote. So when I go to the polls, I have in the front of my mind, not just the back, that saturates my spirit, that they were killed, lynched, women were gang raped, people were denied employment, people were harassed, the victims of violence, just by trying to exercise their constitutional right to vote. They came up with poll taxes, grandfather clauses. They had literacy tests. They asked people at the poll to read the Constitution, and the very people who were poll watchers, they couldn't read the Constitution. But yet they expected someone who was denied the right to learn how to read and write, read the Constitution. If you can't read the Constitution, then you can't vote. That's the hypocrisy that African people were subjected to in the United States. So I vote to vindicate our ancestors. When I cast my ballot and I go to the ballot box, I do it in the name of all of those who were denied their constitutional right to vote by being in this country. The third reason why I vote is for future generations. We want our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, our own children to inherit a better world. And I found out through systematic study that the overwhelming majority of the programs, services, activities, and projects that prevail in the United States flow through the political process. And if voting wasn't important, just ponder that thought. If voting wasn't important, why did Michael Bloomberg spend $500 million on political ads to run for president in 3 months? Not 3 years, 3 months, not 30 years, 3 months, $500 million. And I would talk to my colleagues in ministry who embrace Bloomberg. I disagreed with them. I said, if he was so concerned about the plight of African Americans running for president, then why don't he donate $1 million to each black college and university? Why don't he donate $1 million to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People? Why don't he donate $1 million to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference? Why don't he donate $1 million to Trans Africa? Why don't he donate $1 million to the National Action Network? Why didn't he donate $1 million to those who are involved in reducing the violence in inner city neighborhoods and rural areas, but particularly inner city neighborhoods, black and brown people, and donate millions of dollars to those organizations that are fighting the good fight to try to curb the violence and crime in those communities? And he still will have millions of dollars left over if he did something like that. So future generations, I would like for my grandkids, I'm a grandfather, I would love for my grandkids to inherit a world that's better than the one that we're presently living in. This is the greatest country on the face of this earth, but it can be better. We don't want to make America great again. America is great today in the 21st century, March 19th. America is great. We want America to be better. And we can do that, irrespective of skin color, sex, age, religious and political beliefs, economic background, and so on. And not just Christians, our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Buddhist brothers and sisters, our Hindu brothers and sisters, those brothers and sisters who embrace Afrocentric spiritualism. All of us can work together on our spiritual path, and we can make America better. We can make America better. Number 4, I vote in the name of my people. I'm proud to come from African Americans, African people living in America. I'm unapologetically Christian, unashamedly black, African American. Proud to be, not anti anyone. On St. Patrick's Day, the Irish celebrate. No one in the African community, no one in the African American community and people of color and whites of goodwill are offended by St. Patrick's Day. If we want to wear a green tie or a green hat or have a shamrock or whatever, we have the right to do that, to celebrate with our Irish brothers and sisters. So it's not anti anyone, it's just affirming your humanity and your dignity as a human being on this earth. There's no black race and there's no white race. It's the human race, but they're all black people and they're Europeans and there's Anglo-Saxon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I do it in the name of our people. We look at the plight of African Americans. We have made tremendous progress, but we have a long, long way to go. We have more black doctors than we ever had before, more black CEOs, college professors, public officials than we ever had before. How could Shirley Chisholm have been elected from Brooklyn, the first female African American congressperson? She had to get votes. So if everyone had that viewpoint, my vote doesn't count, how would she have ever made it? Oh, she stood up. She was courageous, politically astute, unbossed and unbought. That was her theme. Unbossed and unbought. But no chauvinism is going to stop her, and nobody's money is going to have her compromise her principles, her standards, and her ethics. How about Harold Washington, the first African American who was elected by the people in the city of Chicago? I never met Harold Washington, but when he died, I cried like a baby, as if he was an uncle or relative of mine, because he had something that words couldn't even capture. He had it, quote unquote. He was a man of the people. He was beloved. He was held in high esteem. And he genuinely cared about improving the meaning and quality of life for people in Chi-Town. And I live in New York, the state of New York, the Empire State. And when he died, it touched my heart and I cried like a baby. And if I would have been in Chicago to vote for him as mayor, I would have voted for him because he resonated with me. His platform, his vision, his perspective, his charisma, his care, his compassion for the least of thee. And Jesus said, what you've done unto the least of thee, my brethren, you've done unto me. So we say to our Latino brothers and sisters, our Asian brothers and sisters, our Native American brothers and sisters, and whites of goodwill, we do this to honor our people. We come from a great people. We are beautiful, energetic, creative, intelligent, peace-loving people who are determined to be free and remain with God. And one way we can do that is through the ballot box. Look at Dr. King and all the leaders in the civil rights movement and all the unknown soldiers. Look at the Black Power movement. They used the ballot box. There were some radicals who said, don't vote, organize. I say, let's vote and organize. Let's vote and organize. It's not one versus the other. The fifth reason I feel we should vote, for our families. We have to rebuild our families. Let's elect people who will deliver the goods, not empty rhetoric, platitudes, telling us that they're gonna send us to the moon without a rocket ship. False promises. We want people to not divide us. We want to unify us, bring us together. We want to turn to each other and not on each other in the name of our God. So we say to the faith-based institutions that we have to go to the ballot box and vote, and try to be on the right side of the issues, study the issues, study the candidates, know what they stand for, and vote our conscience and vote as we're led by our God. I also want to vote for me. The sixth reason is to vote for me. I live in this society. I try to be a polydimensional human being, try to follow Jesus to the best of my ability. I've been following him for the last 42 years now. And I can say that since the 1970s, all the way up to the present, I probably missed one or two elections on a local or state level or in the federal level. Every election, I'm going to step up and participate. Every election, because I want to make sure that my voice is heard through the ballot box. And I join my brothers and sisters, the candidate of my choice. That's confidential. Who you vote for, that's entirely up to you and your conscience. But to say that my vote doesn't count, or I don't believe in voting in the name of God, God is not going to do everything. God will be there to empower us through his Holy Spirit to go, and as we study, to show ourselves approved unto God, workmen and women who need not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. We go as one avenue, one door to go to the ballot box. Rain or shine, it doesn't matter. And then the seventh reason why we ought to vote is because we let the opposition know that everyone doesn't share their warped and skewed vision and reactionary agenda that they want to superimpose upon the nation. We need to participate. This is not the time for us to be cynical, be in despair, be despondent. This November 2020, I believe November the 3rd, will probably be the most important presidential election in the history of this great country. And the key is turnout. The key is turnout. I don't need a marching band outside of my house for me to go to the polls to vote. Everyone 18 years of age and older should register. I believe you still have time to vote and turn out and vote for the candidate of your choice. No one can tell you who to vote for. Just make sure you vote your interest. You'll end up on the right side. So those are 7 reasons why we can get the dirt out of politics by our participation. Since we see that it's dirty, we offer Mr. Clean and Mrs. Clean. And we go in and say we're going to clean up the body politic for those who are going to run for office, and they're going to represent their constituency by unifying America and making sure that they address things in the community that are needed. So what are some things that we need? We need well-paying and self-fulfilling jobs for all those who are willing and able to work. We need a living wage, at least $15 per hour or more for working people so they can live comfortably in this society. We want livable and beautifully constructed housing for all families, irrespective of income. Affordable housing is what we need. It is a shame before God that there's homelessness in America. City after city, rural areas and urban cities, there's homelessness, and it's mounting on a weekly basis. This is unconscionable and completely unnecessary. We need parks and other recreational facilities for our children. We need after-hour school programs for our children so they can have wholesome activities to participate in while their parents may be coming from work, or if they're exhausted from work, they'll have some time to relax, and their children are in good supervision and good care, and they come back to the home and they'll be able to interact with their children. We need safe and clean environment. It is a shame before God. It is a sin to the nation that people in Flint, Michigan have contaminated water. Other cities in Newark, but they're addressing it in Newark under the mayor. He's addressing it at the city council. They're taking the bull by the horns and they're addressing the matter. And city after city where there's contaminated water. It's unconscionable that this happens in the 21st century. It's a human right to have clean water. We want open access to the highest quality education and medical care that society has to offer. That comes through the political process because budgets are allocated. We need to know the politics of budgets, not just be so heavily minded that we know earthly good, and not be so rooted to the earth that we don't know we're on our way to heaven. We need improved policing with our communities. We need police officers to serve and protect our communities. Every one of the cases in the last 30 years where people have died in police custody or by the police, they should still be alive. And if they did anything wrong and violated the law, let them go to court and let them have their day in court. We have George Zimmerman, a wannabe police officer, with Trayvon Martin. About 8 years ago, Trayvon, this is a tribute to Trayvon and his beloved mother and father and all the other members of his family. Our heart bleeds. I hear his blood crying from the ground. Zimmerman was the aggressor. What happened that night? Here's Trayvon with his father visiting a female companion of his father in the state of Florida, in a gated community. And they were watching the NBA All-Star game, and Trayvon decided, a teenager, decided to go to 7-Eleven and purchase a can of iced tea, a bag of Skittles. And on the way back from the store, he's on the phone talking to a female friend. And George Zimmerman had the audacity and the unmitigated gall and the nerve to say, he looks like he's up to no good. Based upon what? The fact that he had a hoodie and he was black, walking in a gated community, has a right to be there. So I want to ask some questions to people who don't believe in voting, because they had stand your ground there. And we'll get to that and what I have to say in reference to the tribute. Was Trayvon Martin breaking into mailboxes? Was Trayvon Martin checking doorknobs to see if he can burglarize somebody's townhouse or their condominium? Was Trayvon Martin trying to break into parked cars? Was he harassing people on the streets? Was he a peeping Tom looking in people's windows? The answer to all those questions are no. And the dispatcher told George Zimmerman, don't approach him. Zimmerman approaches him. They have a verbal altercation. It degenerates into a physical altercation. And he takes out a gun, Zimmerman, and shoots Trayvon. Trayvon didn't confront him. Zimmerman was the aggressor. They had the trial, as you know, and this man gets acquitted for murder. And we're supposed to say, oh, well, Trayvon, he was a hoodlum. No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. He was a teenager in a community, minding his own business, talking to a female friend on the phone, and he was not committing a crime. And George Zimmerman still lives in the community, and he has a rap sheet himself. So one day he will stand before God. But in the political process, we need people elected who are going to be fair-minded, equi-minded, don't have a racial bias in reference to these matters, and they will stand up and call for justice for everyone, equal justice under the law. That's what we want in America. As Christians, we should be in the forefront, along with our brothers and sisters in other faith, to stand up and say, in the name of our God, for me, the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, we stand up and say, we will use our vote, use the ballot box, and then go beyond the ballot box and build a powerful and dynamic and growing and educated mass movement for social concern and radical nonviolent social change. We need a mass mobilization of ordinary people in this day and age, of voters who are ready to go to the polls and say enough is enough. We are not going to allow ourselves to become a fascist dictatorship. That is not acceptable. So I say to you that if you believe that your vote doesn't count, how would Auntie Maxine Waters? Oh, yes, sir. She was elected by people in California. How about Harold Washington? As I told you, he was elected in Chicago. May he rest in peace. Shirley Chisholm, may she rest in peace. And on and on and on. Ron Dellums, they never would have been elected to office. So I say to you, go in your prayer life and seek God's face and let him lead you for what's right. People of color, whites of goodwill, we stand together to glorify our God, to use the ballot box, to march if we have to. And we definitely need to march. Some people say, well, what can marching do? It does a number of things. Number one, it gives us a sense of collective power. It lets the opposition know that everyone doesn't agree with them. And number three, it gives us the view that we are beyond just an individual. We have that collective power that we stand up and say, here are people who agree with me, and it's a physical display of our dissatisfaction with the status quo. So we believe that our rights are being violated, and they are being violated. Then we will stand up with others. And even if we disagree, we'll do it without being disagreeable. So we'll subordinate our ideological, political, and philosophical differences. And we'll think in terms of we and us to make a better world. So we need a new human society and better way of life for all people. For all people. So I admonish you in this political season and this season of Lent to go forward and be a critical thinker and engage yourself in civic activity and make sure that it's conscientiously done, and do it nonviolently, do it with love in your heart, because we have future generations that want to inherit a world that will be in the best interest of the human race. So God bless you. May heaven continue to smile upon you. And I'll meet you at the polls. We'll continue to pray. We'll continue to praise God. We'll continue to worship. We'll continue to work. We'll continue to march. We'll donate money to causes that we believe in and organizations that we believe in and to individuals who share our vision. And then we'll also monitor things in the courts. You don't have to be a judge or a lawyer to do that. So those are the things that we can do. And we will make sure that we'll release our faith in God, because the just shall live by faith. God bless you. This is straight from the heart. The Reverend Dr. Tony Hart, who's the esteemed pastor of Beulah Baptist Church in the Falls, Wappinger Falls, New York. God bless you and keep the faith.